You know, people always tell you how much they love their pets. They say, oh, he's like my child, or she's my best friend. And you nod because you get it. But until you live it, until you have that creature who is basically a furry, snorting, four-legged extension of your own heart, you don't really get it. For us, that creature was Winston. Winston as well, he was at the time a 2-year-old Pibble dog. He wasn't one of those big athletic dogs. He was compact, kind of dense, with ears like satellite dishes and a face that looked permanently concerned. He snored like a rusty chainsaw, and he had this hilarious little waddle when he walked. He was, without exaggeration, the centerpiece of our life. My husband, Mike, and I, we structured everything around Winston. If we were going out, we asked, "Can Winston come?" If the answer was no, we usually stayed home. This story, the one I'm about to tell you, starts with a move. A big one. We were leaving the comfort of our little apartment in Boston and moving all the way out to San Diego. It was exciting, terrifying, and mostly just stressful. And the biggest stressor, flying Winston. Flying a Frenchie is a nightmare, honestly. Because they are brachycephalic, that means flat face that can overheat easily, especially in the cargo hold. We had spent weeks arranging special flights, getting the vet clearance, buying the approved, reinforced kennel. We paid extra for the airline that promised the most temperature-controlled environment. We did everything right. The first leg of the trip from Boston to Los Angeles was agonizing. Every bump of turbulence, every slight delay. I was gripping Mike's hand and whispering, "He's okay. He has to be okay." When we landed at LAX, it was a massive relief. We had a 6-hour layover before the final flight to San Diego, and the plan was simple. Get Winston out, let him stretch his legs, give him water, and let him use the relief area before putting him back in his crate for the short hop south. LAX. If you've been there, you know it's not an airport. It's a small, chaotic city built entirely out of concrete and jet fuel. It's loud, it's confusing, and it's endless. We met the baggage handler at the oversized luggage claim Terminal 4, I think it was. The handler was a nice young guy who wheeled out Winston's crate, which looked enormous sitting next to our carry-ons. "He's been fine, Mom," the handler said, wiping sweat from his brow. "A little vocal maybe, but he seems happy." I knelt down instantly. Winston heard my voice. He started whining, a low, pleading sound. "Hi, baby. Hi, Winsty." I unclipped the crate door. Winston shot out like a cork from a champagne bottle. He wasn't running. He was just so excited to be free of the dark box. Now let me pause here and tell you about the leash. We had a heavy-duty nylon leash and a harness that wrapped around his chest and back. This wasn't some flimsy collar, this was the military-grade equipment we use for hiking. We were paranoid about him slipping out. The protocol we had agreed on was that before the crate door opened, a leash had to be clipped to the harness. Mike was on the floor doing the clipping. Winston was wiggling ecstatic, licking Mike's face. The baggage handler was waiting nearby, holding a clipboard. I was simultaneously trying to keep our 2 rolling suitcases from tipping over and trying to find the nearest pet relief area on my phone. "Got it," Mike said, pulling the leash taut gently. "Okay, let's get him outside," I said, grabbing the handle of the first suitcase. Winston took a step, then another. He was so focused on smelling the floor, a mix of disinfectant and airplane exhausts, that he wasn't paying attention to the leash. And this is the moment, the split second that changed everything. A small child, maybe 3 years old, ran past us, chasing a brightly colored balloon that had slipped its string. The balloon zipped by at ankle level, and the child let out a piercing shriek of pure joy. Winston, who is usually unflappable, startled. He didn't jump high, he just recoiled sharply, trying to pull back toward the crate, which was now his safe space. Mike had the loop of the leash around his wrist, but the sudden, sharp backward jerk was too much. We heard a small, horrifying snap. It wasn't the leash or the harness that broke. It was the clip. The metal carabiner, the heavy-duty one, somehow failed. Maybe it wasn't screwed down tight enough. Maybe the sudden angle of the pull was wrong. I don't know the physics, but I know the sound. That sharp, metallic sound of failure. The leash went slack in Mike's hand. For maybe half a second, we froze, processing the impossible. Winston was still there, sniffing the floor, unaware. Then he lifted his head. He saw the vast, terrifying, bright terminal. He saw the rushing feet, the towering ceilings, the noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He didn't hesitate. Pure panic took over. Winston didn't run towards us for comfort. He bolted, low to the ground, a little brown missile heading straight for the nearest exit sign. "Winston!" I screamed. It was a sound ripped from my throat, a sound I didn't recognize. Mike reacted instantly, dropping to his knees and lunging for the trailing end of the harness. He missed by an inch. Winston was fast. People don't realize how fast a little Frenchie can be when fear is fueling them. He was weaving through luggage carts and people waiting in line for check-in. Stop him. Please stop that dog. Mike yelled, scrambling to his feet. We started running, two terrified parents chasing a terrified child who didn't know he was running toward danger. We followed him past the check-in counters, past the kiosks, toward the double glass doors leading out to the curbside pickup area. The noise out there was 10 times worse. Horns honking, engines revving, shouted directions from parking attendants. It was sensory overload for a dog that thrives on quiet naps. Winston burst through the automated glass doors. He hit the pavement and veered right, dodging a taxi that slammed on its brakes, the driver laying on the horn. He's outside. He's on the street, I screamed, feeling the cold horror crawl up my spine. We ran out onto the curb. The air hit me. It was that thick, exhaust-heavy LA air. We looked left, then right. Winston was nowhere. He was gone. In the expanse of the massive LAX airport, place designed to handle millions of people and thousands of tons of steel, our 12-pound, flat-faced dog had vanished. We stood there, panting, Mike's face white with shock and guilt, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. We had been outside for maybe 30 seconds. Which way, Sarah? Did you see which way he went? Mike demanded, his voice cracking. Right. I think right. Towards the parking structure. I pointed frantically toward the multi-story structure looming nearby, a dark concrete labyrinth. We started running again, shouting his name. Winston. Winsty. Come here, buddy. The sheer hopelessness of the situation hit me immediately. This wasn't a quiet park, this was the busiest airport in the country. There were hundreds of cars, millions of bags, thousands of people rushing, preoccupied. A tiny brown dog running low to the ground was invisible. We ran toward the entrance of the parking garage, dodging airport shuttles. The structure was huge, multiple levels of dark, echoing concrete. He wouldn't go in there, would he? Mike whispered, peering into the gloom. He's scared, Mike. He doesn't know where he's going. We spent the next hour doing what felt like a useless, panic dance. We checked the first floor, running between parked cars, dropping to our knees to look underneath SUVs. We called his name until our throats were raw. Every time a car started, I jumped, terrified that Winston was sleeping underneath it. Every time a dog barked in the distance, and yes, there are service dogs everywhere at LAX, my heart leaped, only to crash back down when I realized it wasn't his familiar, excited bark. Nothing. Absolute silence where there should have been a snort or the jingling of his harness tag. Finally, Mike pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. We need help, Sarah. We can't do this alone. He called the airline immediately. The agent on the other end was sympathetic but ultimately useless. Sir, we handle baggage and flight changes. A lost dog outside the terminal is a matter for airport operations and airport police. So we called airport police. That was the most disheartening call of all. A bored-sounding officer took down the details. Pibble dog, brown, male, 12 pounds, name Winston. He has a microchip. I choked out, tears finally blurring my vision. Yes, Mom. We will alert patrols to keep an eye out for a small, unleashed dog. However, this is a massive area. If he left the immediate premises, it becomes a city matter. A city matter. LAX is right on the edge of the sprawling metropolis of Los Angeles. If Winston had darted across the street, he was now in the city. A city of 10 million people. We went back inside the terminal, our clothes sweaty, our energy completely drained, but our minds racing. We had to get the word out. We found a charging station and huddled over Mike's phone. The priority shifted immediately from searching to broadcasting. Start with Facebook, Sarah. Use the picture from Christmas. The one where he's wearing the little reindeer antlers. People respond to that, like instructed, his voice now flat, practical, and terrifyingly calm. That calm meant he was in shock. I opened my phone, my fingers fumbling with the keys. I posted the picture, along with a desperate, all-caps message, urgent. Lost Pibble dog at LAX. Winston slipped his leash near Terminal 4 arrivals curb around 4:30 p.m. He is small, brown, terrified, and has a blue harness. He is microchipped. We are traveling and desperate. Please, if you are near LAX or the surrounding area, Westchester/include, keep an eye out. Reward offered. Contact information below. I shared it to our personal page. Then I searched for every local Los Angeles pet rescue group, every community page, every neighborhood watch forum I could find. I joined them all and spammed the post. While I was doing that, Ike was on the phone with the microchip company, making sure the contact information was up to date and flagging Winston as missing. It was getting dark outside. The lights of the airport were coming on, making the sprawling complex look even more menacing. We looked at each other, sitting on a hard plastic bench in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by people happily heading home or starting their vacations. We were supposed to be getting on a flight to start our new life. Instead, our life had been ripped open, and the most important piece was missing, alone and scared somewhere in the concrete jungle. We can't leave, I stated, the realization hitting me with the force of a punch. We can't get on that plane to San Diego. No, Mike agreed instantly. We're staying here. We have to find him. We called the airline again, canceling our connecting flight and frantically trying to retrieve the rest of our checked luggage, which was supposed to be heading to San Diego. We needed clothes, toothbrushes, and most importantly, we needed Winston's favorite blanket. Maybe the familiar scent would help. The next few hours were a blur of bureaucratic confusion and growing panic. We were told we couldn't search the secure areas. We couldn't search the runways. We were advised to check the local animal shelters starting tomorrow morning, as they close early. Shelters. The idea of Winston, our pampered subtlebug Winston, locked in a cold, noisy shelter cage was unbearable. Around 8:00 p.m., 4 hours after he vanished, the first flicker of hope arrived, delivered by a notification on my phone. Someone had shared my post and someone else had commented. The comment read, "I think I saw a dog fitting that description." About 5:30 p.m., running fast near the entrance to the 405 freeway tunnel, close to Sepulveda BLVD. It was heading east away from the airport. East. The 405 freeway. That was the worst possible direction. That direction meant he wasn't just hiding in the parking garage. He had crossed the initial busy lanes and was heading toward the main arteries of Los Angeles traffic. He was moving toward the city proper. Mike and I looked at the map on my phone. Sepulveda Boulevard near LAX is a 6-lane monster, and the 405 is one of the busiest freeways in the world. We have to go there, Mike said, standing up. We need to see if anyone else saw him. We found a rental car kiosk that was still open. We needed wheels, and fast. Within 30 minutes, we were in a rented sedan, heading out of the airport loop, following the GPS towards Sepulveda. The air outside the airport felt heavy with potential danger. Every shadow looked like a small, cowering dog. We drove slowly, Mike leaning forward, scanning the sidewalks and bushes. I had my window down, calling his name into the night air. Winston. Winsty. The area around Sepulveda was commercial and industrial strip malls, warehouses and overpasses. It was not a safe place for a small dog. We pulled into a gas station near where the sighting was reported. I jumped out and showed the attendant the photo. "Did you see this dog? Small Pibble dog." The attendant, a tired man in a uniform, shook his head. "Dogs? No, Mom. Lots of traffic, though. You should be careful." We stayed there for another hour, walking the sidewalks, checking behind dumpsters, peering into the dark shadows beneath the freeway overpass. The silence was deafening. If he was here, he was hiding deep. Around 10:00 p.m., the social media effort started gaining real traction. The initial post had been shared hundreds of times. People we didn't know were tagging local rescue groups and celebrities who loved Frenchies. The machine of community support was starting to whir. A woman named Lisa, who ran a local Pibble dog rescue group in the valley, messaged me. "Sarah, I saw your post. I know this area. LAX is terrifying. The good news is Frenchies are smart, but they are not fast marathon runners. He's hunkered down somewhere close. Do not leave the area. We need scent items. Do you have his favorite toy or blanket?" Yes, we did. Our luggage had finally been retrieved, sitting in a heap back at the terminal. We drove back to LAX, got Winston's favorite, ratty, blue blanket and a bag of his smelly, beef-flavored treats. We drove back to Sepulveda. Lisa gave us instructions. Lay the blanket down somewhere safe, like a small patch of grass near a building entrance away from the main road. Put some treats on it. Frenchies have terrible eyesight, but their sense of smell is strong. This is a passive trap. If he's hiding nearby, he might smell home and come out when it's quiet. It felt absurd, setting up a little dog bed on a patch of concrete next to a Denny's parking lot, but we were desperate. We laid the blanket out under a streetlight and sprinkled the treats around it. Then we retreated to the car, parking about 50 feet away, where we could watch. The waiting began. This was day 1. The day of the escape. The day of the immediate, paralyzing guilt. The day we realized we were no longer just 2 people moving across the country. We were 2 people stranded in a massive, cold city, hunting for a tiny dog who might have been hit by a car hours ago. Every passing car made my heart jump. Every sound of rustling leaves or wind blowing a plastic bag made me lean forward, straining my eyes. Mike broke the silence in the car, his voice low and heavy. It was the clip, Sarah. I checked it before we left Boston. I swear I checked it. It was the child running past, Mike. It was the noise. It was bad luck, I insisted, but I knew he was blaming himself, just as I was blaming myself for being distracted by the luggage. We both knew the failure was shared, but the pain was solitary and crushing. We sat there until 2:00 a.m. Nothing. The treats remained untouched. The blanket lay empty. We needed sleep, but more than that, we needed a strategy. I messaged Lisa back, nothing tonight. We are staying in a hotel nearby. What do we do tomorrow? Her response was immediate. Tomorrow we go public. We need boots on the ground. Lots of them. Immobilizing my rescue network. You need to print flyers. Hundreds. And you need to call the local news stations. Make him famous, Sarah. That's the only way to find a needle in this haystack. I looked out the window at the empty blanket, illuminated by the harsh street lamp. The idea of getting the media involved felt overwhelming and intrusive, but I knew she was right. Winston wasn't just lost. He was lost in the vastness of LA. He was lost in a way that required a city-wide mobilization. We drove to the nearest motel, shabby place near Westchester, and checked in. We didn't unpack. We just stared at the walls. Before lying down, I went back to my phone. I wrote the text for the flyer, bold, clear, and heartbreaking. I found the nearest 24-hour printing service on the map. Mike fell asleep instantly, the exhaustion of the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. I couldn't. I lay there, visualizing every street corner near the airport, imagining where a small, scared dog might hide. Under a bench. In a storm drain. I thought about his little snorts, his warm weight on my chest, the way he pawed at his food bowl. Tears streamed silently into the pillow. He was out there alone. And it was all our fault. Day 2 had to be different. It had to be the day the city started looking for Winston. It had to be the day we turned our personal tragedy into a public, urgent mission. We had no other choice. We were just getting started. The true search, the massive effort, was about to begin. Day 2 dawned gray, matching the exact color of the concrete outside our motel window. I didn't sleep. Not really. I just lay there, listening to Mike's heavy, exhausted breathing, the kind of sleep that comes from total emotional collapse. My mind was running through checklists: water, food, traffic, coyotes. Yes, coyotes. Los Angeles has coyotes. The thought made my stomach clench into a knot. We were up before the sun. Our first stop was a 24-hour printing place, a FedEx office just off the 405. We printed 500 flyers. 500 beautiful, heartbreaking flyers featuring Winston in his Christmas antlers. You know, when you're doing something like that, something so desperate and public, there's a strange, surreal quality to it. The smell of the laser toner, the mechanical whir of the machine spitting out hundreds of copies of your missing pet's face. Each sheet felt like a punch to the gut. We spent the first hour before rush hour taping those flyers. We hit every light pole, every bus stop, every community bulletin board from the airport loop to Sepulveda, and then pushing further east into the residential streets of Westchester. Mike was a machine. He had that look, the grim, focused determination of a man trying to outrun his own guilt. He carried the staple gun, and I carried the stack of flyers. Hire Mike, I'd say. Make sure they can see his ears. We were a spectacle. 2 people in rumpled travel clothes, looking pale and frantic, stapling pictures of a tiny Pibble dog everywhere. People drove by, slowing down just long enough to read the headline, urgent. Lost Frenchie. $1,000 reward. The reward wasn't entirely true yet. We didn't have a spare $1,000 lying around after the move, but we knew we had to make the urgency real. We'd figure out the money later. As we were finishing up near a small park, my phone rang. It was Lisa, the woman from the Pibble Dog Rescue Group. Sarah, good. You're close to the action. I'm coordinating a search starting at 9 a.m. We have about 15 people confirmed. They are experienced. They know how to grid search. They know where dogs hide. Hearing her calm, professional voice was like getting a lifeline thrown to you in a heavy storm. Lisa, thank you. We'll meet you where? We're meeting at the Starbucks near the In-N-Out on Sepulveda. It's a good central point. Bring your flyers. And bring water. This is going to be hot. When we arrived, it was incredible. There were about 20 people gathered, most of them with their own Frenchies or pugs on short leashes, all wearing brightly colored vests or shirts that said things like Valley Frenchie, Crew or LA Pet Recovery. They were ready to work. Lisa, a woman with fiery red hair and an energy that could power a small city, immediately took charge. Okay, everyone. This is Winston, she announced, holding up one of our freshly stapled flyers. He is scared. He is likely hiding, not running. He's brachycephalic, which means he can overheat quickly. We are focusing on drainage ditches, dense shrubbery, under porches, and industrial storage yards. She divided the area into 4 quadrants A, B, C, E, covering the entire stretch between LIX and the 405 freeway. Mike and I were assigned to Quadrant A, the area closest to the initial sighting near the warehouses and the massive tunnel under the airport approach roads. The search was exhausting. We moved methodically, walking slowly, calling his name in quiet, non-threatening tones, the way Lisa had instructed. Don't shout, Sarah. Just a soft, steady Winston, good boy. If he's hiding, a loud noise will just send him running further. We spent the entire morning peering into storm drains, shining flashlights under semi-trucks parked in lots, and crawling through thorny bushes. The sun rose higher, and the LA heat started to settle in, thick and suffocating. Around 11:00 a.m., a social media effort finally hit critical mass. The post I had made with Winston in his reindeer antlers had been shared over 10,000 times. It had been picked up by a few local mommy blogs and then, crucially, by a massive Instagram account dedicated to Pibble dogs. My phone started ringing incessantly. Mike, look. I showed him a screenshot. A local news reporter from KTLA Channel 5 had messaged me directly. We saw your post. We'd like to run a story during the noon broadcast. Where can we find you? This was it. Lisa was right. We had to make him famous. We rushed back to the Starbucks meeting point where Lisa was coordinating break times. A camera crew was already setting up, complete with a reporter in a crisp blue suit named Jennifer. Jennifer was kind, but she was on a deadline. Sarah, Mike, tell me exactly what happened. We need to convey the desperation. We need people to feel this. Standing there, under the blazing sun, facing the camera lens, a reality of our situation hit me again with full force. It wasn't just a private tragedy anymore, it was a public plea. I started talking, trying to keep my voice steady, explaining the move, the careful planning, the 6-hour layover, the snap of the clip. But when I got to the part where he bolted, that small, terrified missile running toward the traffic, my voice cracked. He's never been alone. He's a comfort dog, I whispered, tears finally streaming down my face. He's probably terrified, hiding somewhere hot and dark. We just need him home. Mike stood next to me, his arm around my shoulder, his face etched with pain. He didn't have to say much, the camera captured everything. The reporter thanked us, promised the story would run immediately, and they packed up and left. We were left standing there, exposed, raw, but hopeful. The impact was instantaneous. By 1:00 p.m., after the news segment aired, the number of volunteers doubled. People who had seen the story, not just Frenchie owners, but regular folks on their lunch break, started showing up with water bottles and maps. The nature of the calls also changed. Before, it was mostly well-meaning but vague. Now, people were referencing the news story and giving specific street names. Sarah, check this one, Lisa said, pointing to a comment on a shared map. My neighbor saw a dog matching the description this morning around 7 a.m. running down 98th Street, near the entrance to the industrial park. He looked distressed, heading inland. 98th Street. That was about 2 miles east of the airport, significantly further than we thought he could travel. He had crossed several major thoroughfares. It meant he was still moving, or at least had moved recently. We jumped back in the rental car, Mike driving with renewed vigor. The industrial park was a labyrinth of corrugated metal fences, shipping containers, and long-haul trucks. It was loud, dusty, and full of hazards. We spent the afternoon traversing that area, shouting his name, showing the flyers to workers coming in and out of the warehouses. The heat was relentless. Winston, being a flat-faced dog, could have collapsed from heat stroke hours ago. This was the fear that was truly paralyzing me. Every time I saw a dark shadow or a discarded item, I braced myself for the worst. Around 4:00 p.m., we got a call from a woman named Maria, who lived in the residential area just across the street from the industrial park. I saw him, I swear. Maria sounded breathless. He was sniffing around my porch about 2 hours ago. A little brown dog, he looks exactly like the one on the news. He tried to get under my hedge, but my big dog, a Rottweiler, started barking and he took off. He ran toward the alley behind the auto body shop on Aviation Boulevard. Aviation Boulevard. That was a huge street, separating the residential area from the last line of industrial buildings before the denser city proper began. This was the most solid lead yet. It gave us a time frame and a direction. Winston was alive, he was hot, and he was seeking shelter. We raced to the auto body shop. The alley behind it was narrow, filled with discarded tires, rusty car parts, and overflowing dumpsters. It smelled strongly of oil and gasoline. We walked the entire length of the alley slowly, our flashlights sweeping the corners. Winston. Treats, buddy. Come on, Winsty. I called softly. Nothing. Just the distant hum of traffic and the occasional loud crash from the junkyard next door. We found a tiny paw print in the dust near a back door too small to be the Rottweiler, possibly Winston. It was another wave of hope, followed by another trough of despair when we realized the trail went cold right there. Day 2 ended with us completely depleted physically and emotionally. We had covered miles, shared our story with thousands, and yet Winston was still a ghost. We returned to the motel that night and collapsed. Mike had blisters on his feet, and my voice was barely a whisper. The phone, however, kept pinging. The LA community was wide awake. Lisa messaged us. Amaro, we changed tactics. We are moving the search perimeter further east into Inglewood. He is trying to find a quieter area. We are putting up scent stations, your blanket, and treats in 5 key locations. We also need to get the city animal control involved in a more organized way. I looked at Mike. Inglewood. He's really deep into the city now. Mike nodded, his eyes wide and vacant. 2 nights. He survived 2 nights out there, Sarah. He's fighting. We can't stop. Day 3 dawned with a different kind of intensity. The initial panic had solidified into a grim, focused determination. We were no longer crying, we were strategizing. We met Lisa and a core group of 20 volunteers back at the Starbucks. Lisa had printed custom maps and assigned specific tasks. The biggest threat now isn't traffic, it's dehydration and heatstroke, Lisa explained. We need people checking every public water source, fountains, garden hoses, even leaky pipes. Mike and I were paired with a young woman named Chloe, a veterinary technician who specialized in flat-faced breeds. She brought a collapsible net and a thermal imaging camera equipment that felt ridiculously professional compared to our simple flyers. Our target area was a wide, mostly residential stretch of Inglewood near a large, fenced-off park called Edward Vincent Jr. Park. It was greener, quieter, and offered more hiding spots than the industrial area. We searched for hours. Chloe used the thermal camera, sweeping it over dense shrubs and under decks. The camera picked up squirrels, cats, and even a large opossum, but no Winston. The constant flow of information from social media was both a blessing and a curse. Every 10 minutes, a new sighting would pop up. Sighting 1, small brown dog seen near a McDonald's dumpster. We rushed there. It was a Chihuahua. Sighting 2, dog hit by a car on Manchester BLVD. We drove there, terrified. It was a dead raccoon. Sighting 3, dog seen resting on a porch near the park entrance. We arrived, a homeowner confirmed it, but said the dog had run away 5 minutes before we got there. That third sighting, the one near the park, felt different. It was close, and the description was perfect. He was sitting perfectly still, panting hard. He looked exhausted, but his ears were up, looking around. Winston's ears. Satellite dishes. We flooded the park area. We had 20 volunteers walking the perimeter, checking the fences for holes, peering into the concrete drainage tunnels that ran under the park. He's here, I insisted to Mike, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I feel it. He's tired, and he's found a place with grass and shade. We spent the entire midday heat in that park. We were joined by a few of the neighborhood kids, who were thrilled by the idea of hunting for a famous dog. They were surprisingly effective, checking small spaces we couldn't fit into. As the afternoon wore on, the exhaustion of day 3 started to override the adrenaline. My voice was gone. Mike was slumped against a tree, chugging water, looking defeated. We missed him, Sarah, Mike whispered, the words heavy with resignation. He ran from the porch, and now he's gone again. We're always 10 minutes behind. No. We keep going, I said, though my confidence was manufactured. Suddenly, Chloe, the vet tech, who had been scanning the thick, Overgrown bushes near the park's eastern fence line let out a small, sharp gasp. Wait! Mike, Sarah! Get over here! Quietly. We hurried toward her. She was kneeling by a chain-link fence that separated the park from a huge, dusty construction site, a massive pit dug into the earth for a new development. Look, she whispered, pointing the thermal camera screen at a gap under the fence. It's faint, but there's a heat signature. Small, low to the ground. It's too uniform to be a rabbit. My breath caught in my throat. I dropped to my knees, peering under the fence. The construction site was a mess of dirt mounds, exposed pipes, and heavy equipment. It was dangerous and deserted because it was Saturday. Mike grabbed the flashlight and shone it through the gap. The light beam cut through the gloom under a large, rusted bulldozer. And there he was. Winston. He was curled up tight in the shadow of the machine's tread, covered in dust, his usually shiny brown fur matted and filthy. His chest was moving, thank God, but he was completely still, eyes wide with terror. He looked smaller than I remembered. He looked utterly broken. Winston, I whispered, my voice trembling uncontrollably. He heard the sound. His head didn't move, but his enormous ears rotated toward the sound. He didn't bark, he didn't whine. He just watched us, frozen. The fear was so deep in his eyes that he didn't recognize us. We were just two more threats. Chloe gently pushed me back. Don't rush him. He's completely shut down. If you lunge, he'll bolt right into that pit. She pulled out a bag of treats. The smelly, beef-flavored ones we had bought. She opened the bag. The scent was strong. Winston's nose twitched, the first sign of life we had seen. Good boy, Winsty, Chloe said softly, tossing one treat slowly toward the gap in the fence. It landed a foot away from his face. Winston didn't move. He's too scared to eat, Ike choked out. This was the hardest moment of the entire 3 days. We were inches away from him, separated by a flimsy fence, and he was too traumatized to come to us. Chloe tried a different tactic. She pulled out the blue, ratty blanket, the one we had left out the night before. She carefully pushed the blanket under the fence, right next to the bulldozer tread. The smell of home. That was the key. Winston watched the blanket, his eyes still wide. Then slowly, tentatively, he shifted his weight. He took one tiny step, then another. He didn't look at the treats. He just nudged his face into the familiar fabric. That small contact seemed to break the spell of panic. A low, pathetic whine finally escaped him. It's okay, baby, I whispered, tears blurring my vision again. Chloe tossed a second treat closer this time, almost touching the blanket. Winston finally lowered his head and snatched the treat, gulping it down. Mike was sobbing silently next to me. Sarah, you go. He knows your voice best, Chloe instructed. Get on your belly and just talk to him. Totally. I got down on the dusty ground, pushing my face right up to the gap in the fence. I started talking, not about the search or the move, but just the stupid, mundane things we always said. Winsty, did you have a good nap? Are you ready for some belly rubs? Daddy misses your snoring, buddy. I heard the sound of a familiar, desperate snort. It wasn't the rusty chainsaw snore, it was the soft, pleading snort he made when he wanted something. He started crawling, pulling himself toward the sound of my voice and the smell of the blanket. He reached the fence. He paused, his little body trembling violently. He looked up at my face. Recognition finally flashed in his eyes. He pressed his face against the chain link, whining piteously. Mike, the cutters, Chloe urgently reminded him. Mike had brought a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters, just in case. He moved swiftly, cutting the chain link around the tiny gap, making the opening just wide enough. I reached my hand through the newly cut hole. Come here, my good boy. Come here, Mom is here. Winston didn't hesitate this time. He squeezed through the gap, not even feeling the sharp edges of the wire. He emerged covered in grime, looking like a miniature survivor, and slammed his small body against my chest. I scooped him up, holding him tight. He was hot, dehydrated, and smelled terrible, but he was solid. He was real. I pressed him against my face, ignoring the dirt. He started licking my tears, his tail giving one small, weak thump against my arm. The moment was overwhelming. I couldn't speak. I could only hold him. Behind me, I heard a massive cheer erupt from the volunteers. We got him. We got Winston. Lisa shouted. And then, through the sound of the cheering, I heard another sound, the unmistakable whir of a drone, and the distant voice of a reporter. The news crew. They had been following the strongest lead and had set up on the other side of the park, hoping for a development. They had just arrived, cameras rolling, capturing the culmination of 3 days of hell. We were reunited, dusty and tear-streaked, live on local television. But honestly, I didn't care about the cameras. All that mattered was the weight of that tiny, snorting, flat-faced dog against my heart. He was home, but the story wasn't quite over. We still had to get him healthy and figure out the aftermath of turning our lives upside down in the middle of a massive city. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the next steps were already waiting for us. We had Winston, but we were still stranded in LA, surrounded by the incredible community that had saved our boy. I scooped him up, holding him tight. He was hot, dehydrated, and smelled terrible, but he was solid. He was real. I pressed him against my face, ignoring the dirt. He started licking my tears, his tail giving one small, weak thump against my arm. The moment was overwhelming. I couldn't speak. I could only hold him. Behind me, I heard a massive cheer erupt from the volunteers, the people who had spent 3 days walking the blistering concrete of Inglewood and Westchester. They weren't clapping, they were shouting, sound of pure shared relief. Then the camera crew, who had raced over from the park, got up. Jennifer, the reporter, was holding a microphone toward us, her own eyes glistening. "Sarah, Mike, how does it feel? You found him." I couldn't form words. Mike, still shaking, managed to speak, his voice thick with emotion. It's everything. Thank you. Thank you to everyone," he stammered, his eyes scanning the crowd of strangers who had made this possible. Chloe, the brilliant vet tech, quickly took charge of the practical side of the miracle. "We need to go now. He needs fluids and a full check. He's overheated," she said, gently taking Winston from my arms and wrapping him securely in the blue blanket. We said rushed goodbyes to Lisa, the incredible woman who had mobilized the entire effort. She looked just as exhausted as we felt, but her smile was radiant. "Go. Get him safe. Text me updates. This is the best day," she called after us. We drove straight to the nearest 24-hour emergency vet clinic, a place about 15 minutes away. The drive felt like a dream. Winston, nestled safely in my lap, was still trembling, but the trembling was subsiding, replaced by the heavy, familiar weight of a dog finally relaxing. He kept his nose buried in the blanket, occasionally letting out a deep, shuddering sigh. At the clinic, the staff already knew who he was. We were ushered in immediately. "The Frenchie from LAX. We've been following the news," the admitting nurse said warmly. They took Winston back for a full examination. Mike and I were left sitting in the sterile, quiet waiting room, suddenly alone after 3 days of constant noise and panic. We looked at each other, and the dam finally broke. We didn't talk, we just held each other, the relief washing over us in waves. The guilt, the fear, the exhaustion, it all came pouring out in silent tears. The vet came out an hour later. She was calm and professional. "Winston is incredibly lucky. He's severely dehydrated, has some minor scrapes on his paws, and he's malnourished. He clearly hasn't eaten much. But no broken bones, no heat stroke, no internal injuries. His microchip is clear. We've given him fluids and some anti-nausea medication. He's resting now." She paused, looking at us kindly. "He is, however, extremely stressed. He's going to need quiet and comfort for a long time. You can take him home in a couple of hours, once the fluids are done." Even the sound of the word felt foreign and wonderful. While Winston was resting, Mike and I had to face the logistics of the miracle. Our phones were exploding with notifications. The reunion video had gone viral. People were commenting, crying, celebrating. The immediate task was the reward. We had promised $1,000. We hadn't found him directly through a tip, but the community effort was the reason we were standing there. Mike immediately got on the phone with Lisa and Chloe. "We need to thank everyone, but we also need to honor the reward," Mike explained. "We are going to set up a GoFundMe to cover the reward and to donate the rest to Lisa's rescue group." Lisa insisted that the reward money should be split among the core volunteers who had worked tirelessly, and that any excess should go toward the rescue group. We agreed instantly. The kindness we had received was repaid with tangible support for the community that had provided it. Chloe, who had spotted the heat signature, refused any personal reward. "Finding him safe was my reward, Mike. Just promise me you'll never put him on a plane again." That was the next, most crucial decision. The one thing we knew for certain, Winston was never ever flying again. The risk was too high, the trauma too great. We were supposed to fly to San Diego that day. Instead, we were grounded in LA with a recovering dog. I stated simply, watching the news loop on the clinic TV. A dusty, tear-streaked me holding a filthy, trembling Winston. We rent a car big enough for his crate, and we drive the rest of the way. It's only a couple of hours, but we take it slow. Mike agreed instantly. The move to San Diego had been about a new job and a new life, but the past 3 days had brutally clarified our priorities. Our life was Winston. Everything else was secondary. We paid the vet bill. It was steep, but worth every penny, and around 9:00 p.m. on day 3, we walked out of the clinic with our boy. Winston was clean now, wrapped snugly in his blue blanket, wearing a fresh bandage on a little scrape on his leg. He was tired, but when I called his name, he gave me a slow, happy lick on the hand. The next morning, we checked out of the shabby motel and into a much larger rental car and SUV that felt safe and sturdy. We secured Winston's crate in the back seat, lined with the scent of home. We had learned our lesson: no more harness outside the crate until we were safely inside a secured space. The drive from Los Angeles to San Diego is usually about 2 hours. For us, it felt like 200 miles of decompression. We drove south on the 5 freeway, a massive sprawl of LA slowly giving way to the gentle hills and ocean vistas of Southern California. Winston slept almost the entire way. He didn't snort the rusty chainsaw snore. It was a quiet, deep, restorative sleep. Every 10 minutes, I would reach back and touch his head, just to feel his warmth, just to reassure myself that the weight was real, that he wasn't a phantom of panic. Mike drove silently, his grip tight on the wheel. Finally, as we crossed into Orange County, he spoke. "Sarah," he said, his voice still ragged, "do you realize how lucky we are? We made so many mistakes, but the world didn't punish him for them. The world was kind, Mike." "That's what I realized," I replied, looking out at the endless blue of the Pacific. We focused so much on the chaos of the airport, the traffic, the danger. But when we needed it, the city showed us its heart. Lisa, Chloe, the hundreds of people who risked their time and their sweat. We arrived in San Diego late that afternoon. Our new apartment was quiet, empty, and smelled faintly of fresh paint. It was a blank slate. We set up Winston's bed immediately, placing his favorite chew toy and water bowl next to it. He walked in, sniffed the new carpet cautiously, and then, with a sigh of immense relief, climbed into his bed. Mike and I sat on the floor next to him, watching him settle in. He pressed his body against the wall, seeking that sense of security he had lost in the vast, open space of the airport. He looked up at us, his big, soulful eyes filled with exhaustion, and then, he did something he hadn't done since the chaos began. He stretched out his front paws, yawned wide, and let out a single, loud, familiar, rusty chainsaw snort. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The move was stressful. Starting a new job was stressful. Unpacking boxes was stressful. But none of it mattered. We were together. The story of Winston, the little Frenchie who escaped LAX, became a local legend for a few weeks. We got calls and messages for months checking in on him. We used the GoFundMe to pay the reward and made a substantial donation to Lisa's rescue group. We even got a visit from Chloe when she was down in San Diego a few months later. Winston recovered fully, though he was never quite the same when it came to loud noises. Any sudden shriek or car horn would make him jump. He became even more of a shadow to us, refusing to be out of sight. His crate, once a source of anxiety, became his sanctuary. We learned a profound lesson about preparedness, about the fragility of life, and about the sheer, overwhelming power of community. People ask us all the time, was it worth it? Moving across the country, all that stress? And my answer is always the same. Yes, absolutely. Because the move, the disaster, the 3 days of hell, it all taught us that while we might think we own our pets, they own our hearts completely. And when you lose a piece of your heart in the middle of a massive, cold city, you realize that nothing else matters until that piece is safely back where it belongs. Winston is 4 years old now. He's healthy, happy, and snoring loudly right now, curled up between Mike and me on the couch. And I promise you, every time I hear that snort, I remember the silence of those 3 days, and I thank every single stranger in Los Angeles who helped bring our boy home. We survived the concrete jungle, and we came out on the other side, stronger, dirtier, and with a far deeper appreciation for the little, snorting life that defines our own. We've exhausted every resource. We spent the next week looking for a solution. We considered selling the house and moving into a smaller, cheaper apartment, but the logistics of moving Winston and the cost of the sale made it impractical. We considered trying to sue the shelter again, but the attorney's warning echoed in my ears. Then Sarah found a solution, or what she thought was a solution. "Jake, look at this," she said, holding up her laptop. It was an advertisement for a national Pibble dog rescue organization, one far larger and more well-funded than the local Rocky Mountain shelter. They specialize in dogs with congenital conditions, specifically hemivertebrae and severe IVD. They have a massive network of foster homes and high-end veterinary partners. They also run a medical grants program. A grant? For us? I scoffed. We were the owners, not a shelter. No, not for us. But listen, she said, reading the fine print. They offer a surrender and medical transfer program. If an owner is financially overwhelmed by a chronic, expensive congenital condition, it will take the dog, cover all past and future medical debt related to the condition, and place the dog in a specialty foster home that can manage the care. My heart sank. Surrender. Give up Winston. Sarah, we can't, I choked out. We can't give him away. We almost lost him. We went through financial hell to save him. I know, she cried, tears welling up. But look at our bank account, Jake. We are drowning. If we surrender him, they cover the $28,000 we already owe, and they take over the $1,500 monthly expense. We get our lives back. We get to breathe again. And what about Winston? He'll be shuffled off to a stranger, I argued, the thought making me physically ill. But he'll be healthy, and he'll be walked by people who aren't constantly worried about missing a loan payment. He'll get the specialized, expensive physical therapy we can no longer afford. The argument raged for days. It was the core conflict of our lives, our love for Winston versus the crushing reality of the debt and the impossibility of providing him with the level of care he truly needed long term. We had saved his life, but we had ruined our own in the process, and now we had to choose which life to salvage. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. We had fought the shelter's negligence, we had faced down paralysis, and we had stared down financial ruin, only to realize that the most loving thing we could possibly do for Winston might be to let him go. The debt was the deciding factor. The bank called again, this time threatening to raise the interest rate on the loan unless we made a massive principal payment immediately. We had nothing left to give. One rainy Tuesday morning, after an agonizing, sleepless night, Sarah and I sat down and contacted the National Pibble Dog Rescue. We filled out the application, detailing Winston's medical history, the hemivertebrae, the surgery, the ongoing need for bladder expression, and the total cost incurred. We didn't tell them we were financially ruined. We just presented the facts of his extreme, lifelong needs. A week later, we got the acceptance call. They were thrilled to take him into their specialized program. They confirmed they would handle the remaining debt with the specialty hospital and assume responsibility for all future medical bills. The day we drove Winston to meet the rescue coordinator was the darkest day of our lives. We drove the long, familiar route to the veterinary specialty center, but this time we weren't taking him for treatment, we were giving him away. We carried him inside, his little cart folded up under my arm. He was walking now, wobbling but walking, the testament to the sacrifice we had made. We met the foster coordinator, a kind, sturdy woman named Denise. She was warm and professional. She didn't judge us. She just looked at the stack of medical files and nodded. You gave him a fighting chance, Denise told us gently. You saved his life, and now we will ensure he has the best quality of life possible. He will go to a home experienced with spinal issues, and they will continue the PT and bladder expression. We signed the final paperwork, the surrender documents. My hand trembled, signing away the little dog who snored between us every night. We knelt on the cold tile floor for our final goodbye. Sarah buried her face in his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. I held him tightly, feeling the ridges of his newly healed spine, promising him over and over again that we loved him. He licked my tears, his eyes full of the usual, quiet trust. He didn't understand. How could he? When we finally stood up, Denise gently took his harness. Winston looked back at us one last time as she led him away, his little tail giving a nervous, confused wag. We walked out of the clinic and into the pouring rain. Our car felt vast and empty. We drove home in silence, the emotional weight of the loss heavier than any debt. We had saved his life, but we had lost our perfect dog, and we had sacrificed our stability, only to end up right where the shelter wanted us, with a clean slate, but a shattered heart. The hidden secret of the perfect Frenchie hadn't just ruined our finances, it had forced us to make the ultimate, heartbreaking choice, ensuring that a piece of our lives would forever be missing, replaced by the ghost of a little dog and the cold reality of the debt we still had to pay off. We had done the right thing for Winston, but we felt profoundly, devastatingly wrong. We were home, but the heart of our home was gone. Now we had to start over. We had to rebuild our lives, piece by painful piece, haunted by the echo of tiny, clumsy footsteps, and the phantom weight of a paralyzed body we once cradled. The debt was gone, but the emptiness was permanent. And we still had to look at that empty space in our bed every single night. The worst, however, was yet to come, because even though we had surrendered Winston, the consequences of the shelter's deception were far from over. There was one final twist waiting for us, one that would make us question whether we had made the right choice at all. We walked out of the clinic and into the pouring rain. Our car felt vast and empty. We drove home in silence, the emotional weight of the loss heavier than any debt. We had saved his life, but we had lost our perfect dog, and we had sacrificed our stability, only to end up right where the shelter wanted us, with a clean slate, but a shattered heart. The hidden secret of the perfect Frenchie hadn't just ruined our finances, it had forced us to make the ultimate, heartbreaking choice, ensuring that a piece of our lives would forever be missing, replaced by the ghost of a little dog and the cold reality of the debt we still had to pay off. We had done the right thing for Winston, but we felt profoundly, devastatingly wrong. We were home, but the heart of our home was gone. Now we had to start over. We had to rebuild our lives, piece by painful piece, haunted by the echo of tiny, clumsy footsteps, and the phantom weight of a paralyzed body we once cradled. The debt was gone, but the emptiness was permanent. And we still had to look at that empty space in our bed every single night. The worst, however, was yet to come, because even though we had surrendered Winston, the consequences of the shelter's deception were far from over. There was one final twist waiting for us, one that would make us question whether we had made the right choice at all. The silence of the house was deafening. After weeks of monitoring Winston's breathing, listening for a whine, rushing to express his bladder, and hearing the constant, rhythmic click of his little wheels on the hardwood floor, the quiet was a physical ache. Sarah and I tried to resume our old routine. We went out to dinner once, just to prove we could, but we spent the whole meal staring at each other, waiting for the sound of a Frenchie snort that never came. We came home early and sat on the couch, where Winston used to burrow. We didn't talk about him much, the grief was too raw, too close to the surface. But the financial relief was real. The National Rescue Organization, true to their word, had settled the outstanding bills with the specialty center and wiped the credit card debt related to Winston's surgery. We were still stretched thin from the personal loan we took out against our retirement to cover the initial MRI and ICU stay, but we were no longer sinking. We could afford the car tires. We could breathe. About 3 weeks after the surrender, I was catching up on local news online while eating a solitary lunch. Sarah was back at work, trying to make up for the time she'd taken off. I was scrolling through the Denver Post website, looking at articles about the upcoming mayoral race, when a headline caught my eye. It wasn't a huge banner headline, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Rocky Mountain Animal Shelter under investigation for fraudulent adoption practices. I clicked the link instantly. The article detailed a preliminary inquiry launched by the state attorney general's office following a surge of complaints from adopters of high-risk, high-cost breeds, specifically Pibble dogs, Boston Terriers, and pugs who had developed severe congenital spinal and respiratory conditions shortly after the 30-day health guarantee expired. I felt a dizzying rush of vindication and white-hot rage. The article quoted several families. One woman, teacher from Aurora, described adopting a young Boston Terrier named Buddy who was diagnosed with grade 4 IV just 6 weeks after adoption, requiring $10,000 in surgery. Sound familiar? Then came the kicker. The investigation was focusing on the shelter's veterinary protocols. The article stated that internal whistleblowers alleged that basic, necessary X-rays for brachycephalic breeds were often skipped to cut costs, or, worse, at X-rays, showing obvious congenital defects like hemivertebrae were intentionally misfiled or marked as routine stiffness to ensure the dog was quickly adopted out. They were running a shell game, the article quoted a former staff member saying. They knew those dogs were liabilities, and they pushed them out the door before the bomb went off. I slammed my laptop shut. They knew. Emily, the shelter manager, the vet, they had all been complicit in a calculated deception that was financially devastating dozens of families across the state. I called Sarah immediately, my voice shaking. You need to read the Denver Post. Now. They're investigating the Rocky Mountain shelter. When she called back an hour later, she was crying, but this time it wasn't just sadness, it was pure unadulterated fury. They lied about the owner moving story, she choked out. They lied about Winston being structurally sound. They set us up, Jake. They knew they had a dog that would cost a fortune, and they found the first couple stupid enough to fall in love with him. But the worst realization wasn't the deception itself, it was the timing. We gave him up 3 weeks ago, Sarah, I whispered, the weight of the realization crushing me. This investigation is public now. If we had just held on a little longer, if we had waited until the initial news broke, we might have had legal leverage. We might have forced them to pay. We might have kept him. The sacrifice we had made, the gutting of our savings, the emotional tearing apart of our family, might have been completely unnecessary. We had surrendered Winston into the care of strangers, because we believed we had reached the absolute end of our financial rope, only to find out that the rope was about to be cut by the state, forcing the shelter to assume responsibility. The thought that we gave up our dog, our sweet, wobbly, recovering boy, for a debt that might have been legally nullified in a few more weeks was a bitter, agonizing pill to swallow. It made the grief almost unbearable. We decided we had to act. We weren't going to sue the shelter ourselves, we still couldn't afford the fight, but we could join the collective action. I called the Attorney General's office and provided all of our documentation, the original adoption contract, Dr. Chen's initial diagnosis, Dr. Reed's surgery reports, and the $28,000 in bills. We spent an afternoon printing everything out. It felt good to finally use that massive stack of receipts for something other than panic attacks. We added our story to the growing pile of evidence, confirming the pattern of fraud. The investigation became a huge local story. The Rocky Mountain Animal Shelter was eventually shut down by the state, their adoption license revoked. The manager, Emily, and the chief veterinarian were facing serious charges. It was a victory for consumer rights and animal welfare, but for us, it was a hollow one. Justice had been served, but it had come 3 weeks too late. We were left with the question, did we make the right choice? Every time I walked past the empty space where his crate used to be, I doubted it. We had chosen financial security over family. Sarah, however, was starting to find a sliver of peace. We need to know he's okay, Jake, she said one evening, wiping away a tear. We need to know that our choice, even if it was premature, actually helped him. I agreed. I contacted Denise, the coordinator at the National Rescue Frenchy Friends Forever. I explained that we were the Millers, the couple who had surrendered Winston, and that we were struggling with the decision, especially now that the shelter fraud was public. Denise was incredibly kind. Jake, I remember you both. You saved that dog's life. You did the hardest thing a loving owner can do. You put his long-term health ahead of your own feelings. She offered us an update that truly changed everything. Winston, we call him Gus sometimes, just like you did, is thriving, she said. He is in a specialized foster home in Boulder with a woman who is a retired physical therapist. She has 2 other Frenchies with mild IVD, so she is set up for total care. He is walking almost completely normally now, though he still needs the bladder expression. He's happy. He's getting hydrotherapy 3 times a week, which is something you simply couldn't have afforded. He is living his best life because of your sacrifice. I relayed this to Sarah, and for the first time since the surgery, she truly smiled. He's walking. He's getting hydrotherapy, she repeated, her voice full of wonder. We gave him the chance to walk, and the rescue gave him the chance to thrive. We didn't fail him, Jake. We set him free. The ultimate resolution wasn't about getting our money back, it was about accepting the outcome for Winston. We had been financially devastated, emotionally destroyed, and then faced with the crushing regret of bad timing, but the dog we loved was safe and healthy, receiving care we genuinely could not have provided long-term. A month later, Denise contacted us again. She said the foster mom, Linda, was comfortable with us having a supervised visit. We drove to Boulder on a crisp Saturday morning. Linda's house was immaculate, with ramps everywhere for the dogs. When Linda brought Winston into the living room, I almost didn't recognize him. He was still compact, still had those enormous bat ears, but his coat shone, and his eyes were bright and alert. He walked with a slight, endearing swagger. He was still the same little engine of joy, but without the stiffness, without the pain. When he saw us, his whole body wiggled. He didn't just trot, he ran the final few feet, launching himself into Sarah's lap with a happy, congested snort. He licked her face, then turned to me, nudging my hand until I scratched him behind his ears. He remembered us. He knew we were his first family. We spent an hour on the floor playing with a rope toy. He wrestled with the same manic intensity we remembered, but when he stopped, he didn't collapse in exhaustion. He just sat up, panting happily. Linda explained his routine, showing us the exercise equipment and the custom ramp to the couch. She was providing the level of relentless, specialized care that would have bankrupted us entirely within the year. As we were leaving, I bent down and held Winston close one last time. Be a good boy, buddy, I whispered into his velvety ear. We love you. He whined softly, a sound of contentment, not pain. Driving home, the silence in the car was no longer hollow. It was peaceful. We were still sad, yes, but the crushing weight of guilt and financial fear was gone, replaced by the certainty that Winston was where he needed to be. The Rocky Mountain Animal Shelter had tried to ruin us. They had sold us a lie, a ticking time bomb wrapped in a beautiful brindle coat. They had cost us $28,000 and countless tears. But in the end, their deception hadn't ruined our lives, it had merely redefined them. We learned that love sometimes means letting go. We learned that the true cost of adoption isn't the fee, but the unwavering commitment to a life, no matter the price. We had paid that price in debt, in sleepless nights, and in the ultimate sacrifice of surrender. Our house is still quiet. We still look at the empty space in the bed sometimes. But we also look at the framed photo Sarah keeps on her desk, a picture of Winston, in his little blue cart, grinning at the camera. We didn't get the perfect Pibble dog we thought we were adopting. We got something much harder, much more expensive, and ultimately much more profound, a lesson in unconditional love, paid for with everything we had. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is still, I swear I can still hear the faint, happy click-clack of a tiny wheelchair rolling across the floor, reminder of the little dog who came into our lives and changed our future forever. We survived the secret, and in surviving we finally found peace.